Welcome back to the podcast, War on Love if I were the devil. And definitely, if I were the devil, I would use wounds and I would use connection to create harm so that people were afraid of connection. And if I were the devil, I would do this as young as possible because it is hard to heal what you don't remember, what you don't feel. And the younger somebody is when they experience these trauma disconnections, these trauma wounds, it it reinforces the idea that there's something wrong with them because there's a lot of times people don't have a memory of a particular event or anything that would make sense to them as to why they experience what they're experiencing. We often say in trauma work that trauma is a time traveler, and the nervous system doesn't know the difference between then and now. It only knows what it learned to survive. So if safety was not modeled when the people who were supposed to provide connection became the source of pain, the brain adapts to that. So it occurred to me as I was thinking and praying and about what episodes I wanted to cover and what topics. I thought about the verse to train up the way a child should go, and when he leaves, he will not depart from it. And that's Proverbs 22:6. And I always thought about talking to our kiddos about God and talking just about manners and how the world works, etc. What if this was actually about attachment? What if the way they should go actually means that somebody took the time to get to know that kiddo, their design, their unique wiring? Because being truly known is one of the most foundational elements of felt safety. There is a difference between somebody having safety and somebody feeling safety. And trust is built not when someone gives us rules, but when someone sees us accurately and guides us and mirrors what we know about secure attachment. That safety is formed when a caregiver or a person who is caring for that child is attuned, not just present, because there's a lot of parents that are present, but they're on their phones and they're not really present. And I am guilty of this. I have definitely considered a lot of times where I was not able to be because of my own trauma or my own woundedness and being overwhelmed with having 3 kids in 2 years. And the great thing is, though, that when we know better, we can do better. And when we get educated and healing for ourselves, we can talk to our kids about it. So, what if this verse, again, Proverbs 22:6, is talking about a relationship where it's more than just knowledge and it's not just about controlling or crushing someone's spirit through just obedience and actually is about taking the time to be with them and equipping them for independence. Because trust grows when guidance is given without an agenda for the other person to stay. So train up, that word, it implies consistency over time. The Hebrew word chanak is to train up. It carries the idea of dedication and repeated practice, like dedicating a building, right? So we're building up, we're training up our children. And it's not about a single moment. It's built through repeated, consistent experiences. Safety is created through patterns of reliability, not just grand gestures, not just gifts, not just great birthday parties, great Christmases, but the day-to-day life speaks from internalized safety. So what if it's actually that safety is inward, meaning that they feel connected, it's safe inside? Because a child will not always have an external guide. So they'll need to have this wisdom internalized. And so secure attachment is only going to happen through consistency over time. A child in a relationship with someone who it's more than just head knowledge and it's stability, it is going to develop a trustworthy relationship. And trust grows when guidance is given without an agenda. Let me give you just a little bit of developmental psychology. So this is from Eric Erickson's 8 Stages of Psychosocial Development. So stage 1, and this is from birth to 18 months. This is when a human child learns trust versus mistrust. This is the foundational question that it needs to be answered adequately for a child to have healthy development? Is the world safe? And can I depend on others? So when caregivers are consistent and responsive, a kiddo learns basic trust. They believe that their needs will be met and that people are reliable. Again, think about the cry it out method. I mentioned that before. When babies are left to cry in their crib in their wet diapers, or they can't sleep, maybe they have a tummy ache and they just have to lay there and cry and cry and cry, that baby is learning about trust and that people are not going to be reliable. And this is really hard for parents to hear, I am sure, if you had succumbed to the teaching of the cry it out method, as I did. Now, I did not have babies that had a lot of fussiness, but I do know that I was kind of taught and heard that you need to not pick up your baby every time they cry because they're going to not learn how to self-soothe and self-regulate. But in this stage, birth to 18 months, it's not about teaching regulation. They're not capable of manipulating. They are only learning about trust and mistrust. And then stage 2, that is more about the autonomy versus shame and doubt. So this is 18 months to 3 years. A kiddo begins to learn how to insert independence. So this is where we talk about the terrible twos. So what they're learning is they're trying to develop a sense of I can do things. And when they're shamed or over controlled, then they internalize doubt about their own capability and will. So a parent who doesn't let them try things because the parent is too tangled up in fear from their own unresolved trauma or their insecurities, then they will continue to step in and not let their kid learn that they can do things. Or if the kiddo is doing things and then the parent is shaming them, then they're also going to have a disruption in that having a healthy sense of self and autonomy. And then stage 3 is called the initiative versus guilt. So this is from 3 to 6 years old when kids start to plan and read and try new things. And they are really starting to learn that their ideas have actions and value. So overcorrection from a parent at this stage, or a lot of criticism, is going to contribute to guilt and hesitation to take initiative. So this kiddo is going to be a follower instead of a leader. And then stage 4, this is from 6 to 12 years old. It's called industry versus inferiority. So kiddos at this age, they're entering the world of school and being surrounded by peers, and success is going to build confidence, which means that I am capable and productive. However, repeated failure or comparison is going to create a core sense of inferiority. This is really tough because kids are really mean. I mean, I hate to say it, but there is a lot of bullying that happens in school now with phones and kids having phones so young. It's just no wonder that kids are having such a hard time with their sense of self and feeling less than, because there's so much comparison. That's really what social media is. I don't know if you saw the documentary about Facebook. I think it was originally called The Book of Face or something, and it was created for the purpose to compare girls from one to another. But I mean, really, that's what social media is. It's either marketing to sell you something, or it is for people to um, just to be able to compare to one another in their lives. And there's good stuff that comes out of social media as well. But for the majority of it, especially for kids, they're learning through the filters, which isn't even in reality, that they're less than, they're not enough. And this is really leading people to feel incapable and hopelessness and helplessness. The other thing is, if there is a condition like ADHD or autism spectrum condition or depression, anxiety, that is unaddressed at this age, is going to make things harder for them, and it is going to interrupt the capacity to be able to develop fully that sense and to feel capable. And then the fifth and final stages is the identity versus role confusion. And this happens from 12 to 18. And so the adolescent is asking, who am I? And this is where we see a lot of confusion in the world. A lot of kids are not feeling real because they're bonding with artificial characters on television and now artificial intelligence. We don't even know the full outcome of the generation that is growing up with the impact of social media and all the television and screen time and the limited, healthy social connection. And then wounded people having children who themselves are not fully healthy and developed, who don't know who they are. They don't have a capacity to be able to usher kids in to this, answer this question in a healthy way. So a healthy environment is going to be essential to explore and have a person develop secure sense of self. And without having a healthy environment, a person is going to continue to struggle who they are and where they belong. And this is where the LGBTQ plus community seems appealing to kids, because it does seem very welcoming, and people who feel like they're on the fringe and they're unaccepted and they're comparing themselves unfairly, that community is really, really welcoming, and it's bright and it's fun, and they can develop that sense of identity. And there's a lot of people who fall into that community and then they come out of it. Unfortunately, though, it's after they transition and then they have to detransition, and there's so much trauma. What is happening to the youth, the central nervous system, everything that goes on to the development of a human by design, that we can study through developmental theory and attachment theory. We can see it's very predictable what humans need. And when they don't get it, there is going to be a breakdown. And the body is always keeping a score. If the body didn't get the message that it's safe, then there's not going to be that felt safety. Even in the absence of danger, the body is still not going to feel safe. There's something called polyvagal theory, and Stephen Porges is a scientist who does a lot of work with the nervous system. And he's talking about how the system is constantly neurocepting the environment, which is on an unconscious level, trying to feel its way. Is it safe, or is it not? And if these early relationships of a human are unsafe, then the body learned that people equal threat. And what this looks like then, if you experience this or if you've seen this on other people, but this lack of felt safety is going to look like hypervigilance in relationships, difficulty receiving love or care, bracing when someone gets close, interpreting neutral cues as threatening. So hearing things that weren't said is really common with this lack of safety. Emotional shutdown when there seems to be feeling like the situation is vulnerable, unable to rest, and especially in God's presence. So people who just feel like they just can't rest, it's unnatural to rest. And then prayer can feel unsafe or performative. So with the wounded attachment, intimacy with God, self, and others, to the body is going to feel impossible. Even though we know with God, he's the Father, Shepherd, Comforter, those are all relational language in the Bible. But if those caregivers were not safe, then God is not going to be safe. And then for self, if the shame is the lens through which a person is looking out at, then a wounded self is going to learn, I am the problem, my needs are too much. And the inner life of feeling like you're walking around a problem. And self-compassion is going to feel arrogant when shame runs the show. That's a common thing in Christian language. Anything with self is selfish in it. And so self-compassion would absolutely. And then safety with others, with the wounded attachment, vulnerability is going to equal exposure, and exposure equals pain and rejection and the potential for abandonment. So this is going to be this push-pull dynamic. They're desperate for connection, but they're also terrified of it. It's called ambivalence. It's like, I want this, but then I'm too scared. So I need you, but I can't let you get close enough to hurt me. Those feelings feel unsafe. So what this can look like a hardened heart, and it's really hard to be in relationship with someone if they have these kinds of patterns. The thing to know, though, it wasn't really born out of rebellion necessarily, but self-preservation. Now, how you experience that person and what you need from them shouldn't change based on how it got to be for them, but approaching this with compassion for both yourself and for the person who has potentially a hardened heart. And because a person who has a hardened heart guard, they took it as, I got to shut it down because it's not safe. And so that became a survival strategy. And then Ezekiel 36:26, the heart of stone, that became like almost like desired, because then you can't get hurt if you have a heart of stone. And so a person who has had a lot of attachment wounding and they didn't get into recovery, they never learned another way to operate, then they probably have emotional walls because distance feels safer than the risk of rejection or abandonment. And spiritual numbness, going through the emotions of church, um, because God feels distant, it's just kind of performative. They're very dismissive of their needs are minimized and others' emotions become irritants. People who have a hardened heart, they become very self-sufficient and they are okay with breadcrumbs for their emotional needs. And they get bothered when other people have needs from them because they think that they shouldn't have them because they don't have them, because they had to learn how to do that as a strategy. And to be with somebody who is using control as armor is really challenging. Again, the reminder that healing is possible. Ezekiel 36:26 reminds us that God will give us a new heart and put a new spirit in us and remove from our heart of stone. But we have to acknowledge that we have a hardened heart. We have to acknowledge that we want things to be different. Just like Jesus asked the man at the pool, do you want to be made? He won't force this healing on us as believers, as his beloved. So we have to recognize, yes, maybe I don't even know how I have a hardened heart, but I have it. And so I need the Lord to help me. And we need to name it. So hardness isn't in and of itself sin. It was survival. We need to have compassion and understand that where this came from, but also take personal responsibility to step into healing from it. We need to regulate before we relate. So if we're in a relationship with someone and we're feeling overwhelmed in our system, we need to learn how to regulate our system, but because otherwise we show up defensively and blame shifting and can do a lot of strategies that are not going to be helpful for connecting with another human. And we need to learn how and step into safe relationships. Sometimes that looks like a therapeutic relationship, a spiritual relationship with a mentor, but slowly over time, this is going to rewire this connection in our nervous system. But it absolutely will require vulnerability. Without vulnerability, there's not an opportunity for this corrective experience. And that vulnerability feels terrifying, but that's why we want to ensure that it's a safe relationship so we don't fall into the trap, because the enemy would love for us to try to have a corrective experience with another wounded human and end up wounding us more. So that's where that therapeutic relationship can be helpful with a therapist or a trauma-informed professional, inner healing prayer, things like that. And then lastly, we definitely need to grieve wounds, this longing that is beneath that hardened heart. We have to get past that hardened heart to get to the longing. And beneath that is grief. This might even need to happen supernaturally, but don't worry. I have had supernatural healing where I did have a hardened heart. Actually, there's part of my story where I had cut my husband out completely. I wanted no part of vulnerability with him because of his multiple relapses and the way that the trauma had continued to affect me and compound over time. And I had not seen him as a safe human, and he was not. But eventually, thank the Lord, he did get into recovery and he did become safe. And supernaturally, the Lord had to open up the eyes of my heart to give me the heart of flesh and to give me this new spirit to be able to see my husband as a human who was safe for me, not the one who was living in active addiction and harming me over and over. So I hope that this gave you some food for thought. And I know we're talking about tough topics here, but we need to. We need to be talking about these tough topics. I do have some resources. If what I am sharing about is in any way triggering or getting you curious about ways in which you need to heal or creating grief for you and remembering ways that you have been hurt or disappointed in your relationships with your partner or family members. 1-800-NEW-LIFE is a number that you could call and let them know what's going on and ask them for a referral in your state, because there is really good help out there. We cannot heal in isolation, and you were not created for isolation. So intimacy into me, you see, is what we need to step into. And that is how we heal. We get hurt in community, but we get healed in community. God bless. I'll see you on the next episode.